Before Russia had a name, the land was a vast, wild expanse. Imagine endless forests, wide rivers, and those long, cold winters. This enormous territory, stretching from Europe to Asia, was home to many different groups of people. For centuries, brave and hardy tribes moved across these plains. They were hunters, farmers, and nomads, each with their own unique culture and way of life. They didn't see themselves as one nation. Instead, they were Scythians, Sarmatians, Goths, and Huns, all leaving their mark on the land. They built small settlements, fought for resources, and traded with their neighbors, laying the very first human foundations in this great, untamed wilderness that would one day become a powerful empire. These early peoples were incredibly resilient. They had to be. The environment was often harsh and unforgiving. The long winters meant they had to be clever about storing food and building warm homes. The vast distances between settlements made communication and travel difficult. Yet they thrived. They learned the rhythms of the land, following the herds of animals and planting crops in the fertile river valleys. The great rivers, like the Dnieper and the Volga, were their highways. They used simple boats to travel, trade goods like fur and honey, and connect with distant communities. This network of rivers would become incredibly important, shaping the future of trade and power in the region. Among the many groups, the East Slavs began to emerge as a dominant force in the western parts of this territory. They were skilled farmers who settled along the riverbanks, creating small but stable communities. They lived in clans and tribes, often led by a local chief. Their beliefs were tied to the natural world. They worshipped gods of the sun, the sky, and the forest. Life was simple and revolved around the seasons of planting and harvesting. These Slavic communities, scattered across the riverlands, were the seeds from which the first Russian state would eventually grow. They were the ancestors of the people who would later call themselves Rus. The story of this land wasn't just about the people living there. It was also about the people who came from outside. From the north, Viking warriors and traders, known as the Varangians, sailed down the rivers. They were looking for new routes to the rich markets of the Byzantine Empire and the Arab world. They were tough, ambitious, and skilled in both fighting and trading. These Varangians would interact with the local Slavic tribes, sometimes raiding them, but often trading with them and even ruling over them. This meeting of Slavic culture and Viking ambition was the spark that would ignite the creation of the first organized state in this land, a state known as the Kievan Rus. The story of Russia as a nation truly begins with the Kievan Rus. Around the 9th century, something incredible happened. A Varangian chieftain named Rurik is said to have established control in the northern city of Novgorod. His successor, Oleg, then moved south. He captured the strategic city of Kiev, located on the mighty Dnieper River. Oleg declared Kiev the mother of all Rus cities, and from this base, he united the surrounding Slavic tribes under his rule. This new state, the Kievan Rus, was a powerful federation. It controlled the vital trade route that stretched from the Baltic Sea all the way down to the Black Sea and the great city of Constantinople. Life in the Kievan Rus was a mix of Slavic traditions and Viking influence. The rulers, or princes, were of Viking descent, but the majority of the population was Slavic. This blend created a unique and vibrant culture. The cities of Kiev, Novgorod, and others grew into bustling centers of trade and craftsmanship. Merchants traveled far and wide, bringing back silks, spices, and silver from the Byzantine Empire and the East. In return, the Rus exported furs, wax, honey, and slaves. This wealth helped the princes build strong armies and impressive fortifications, making the Kievan Rus a major power in Eastern Europe. It was a golden age of prosperity and growth. A huge turning point for the Kievan Rus came in the year 988. The ruler at the time, Prince Vladimir the Great, made a monumental decision. He wanted to unite his people under a single, powerful religion. After reportedly sending envoys to study different faiths, he chose Eastern Orthodox Christianity from the Byzantine Empire. Legend says his emissaries were so amazed by the beauty of the Hagia Sophia Cathedral in Constantinople that they said they knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth. Vladimir was baptized, and he then ordered the mass baptism of his people in the Dnieper River. This was more than just a religious change, it was a profound cultural shift. The adoption of Orthodox Christianity connected the Kievan Rus directly to the rich cultural and intellectual heritage of the Byzantine Empire. It brought a written language, Church Slavonic, which allowed for the creation of literature and historical chronicles. Monasteries became centers of learning and art, Beautiful churches with distinctive onion-shaped domes began to appear across the land, a style that would become a symbol of Russia. This shared faith gave the diverse tribes of the Rus a powerful new identity. It bound them together and set them on a cultural path distinct from both the Catholic West and the Islamic East, a path that continues to influence Russia to this day. Just as the Kievan Rus was flourishing, a storm was gathering in the east. In the 13th century, a terrifying and unstoppable force swept across Asia and into Europe, the Mongol Empire, led by the successors of Genghis Khan. In 1237, a massive Mongol army, known as the Golden Horde, invaded the lands of the Rus. They were brilliant horsemen and ruthless warriors, and the divided Rus princes were no match for their organized might. City after city fell. Kiev, the magnificent capital, was besieged and utterly destroyed in 1240. An eyewitness wrote that so many people were killed that barely anyone was left to weep for the dead. The golden age of the Kievan Rus was over. For the next 240 years, the Russian principalities lived under Mongol rule, often called the Tatar yoke. This was not a direct occupation in the modern sense. The Mongols did not settle the lands in large numbers. Instead, they ruled from a distance from their capital at Sarai on the Volga River. The Russian princes were allowed to keep their thrones, but only if they pledged allegiance to the Mongol Khan. They had to travel to the Khan's court to be confirmed in their position and were forced to pay a heavy annual tribute. Any prince who dared to resist was met with swift and brutal punishment. This period was a time of fear, humiliation, and economic hardship for the Russian people. The Mongol domination had a deep and lasting impact on Russia. It cut Russia off from Western Europe during a crucial period of development, the Renaissance. While cities like Florence and Paris were experiencing a rebirth of art and science, the Russian lands were focused on simple survival. The old trade routes through Kiev were disrupted, and the political center of the Rus began to shift away from the devastated south. The constant threat of raids and the need to pay tribute drained the region of its wealth. The Mongol system also reinforced the idea of absolute centralized power, as the princes had to answer to the all-powerful Khan. This experience would shape Russian political thinking for centuries to come. However, the Mongol period was not entirely negative. In a strange way, it helped to unify the Russian people. Faced with a common overlord, the scattered principalities began to develop a stronger sense of shared identity. The Orthodox Church played a vital role during this time, preserving the language, culture, and faith of the people, and acting as a symbol of unity in a fractured land. And while many cities suffered, a small, previously unimportant town to the northeast began to quietly grow in power and influence. This town was Moscow. It learned to work with the Mongols, collecting tribute for them and slowly, cleverly, positioning itself to one day challenge their rule. While the southern lands of the old Kievan Rus lay weakened, a new power was emerging in the north. The small principality of Moscow, well protected by dense forests, began its slow but steady ascent. Moscow's princes were cunning and politically astute. They developed a special relationship with their Mongol overlords. While other princes resisted and were crushed, the Muscovite princes positioned themselves as the chief tribute collectors for the Golden Horde. This gave them power over other Russian princes and allowed them to absorb smaller, weaker territories into their domain. They were playing a long game, building their strength right under the noses of the Khans. A key figure in this rise was Ivan I, nicknamed Kalita or Moneybag, for his great wealth. He used his position as chief tax collector to enrich Moscow and expand its influence. He also convinced the head of the Russian Orthodox Church to move the seat of the church from the city of Vladimir to Moscow. This was a masterstroke. It transformed Moscow not just into the political and economic center of the Russian lands, but also into its spiritual heart. With the church's backing, Moscow's claim to be the leader of all the Russias became much stronger. The city was no longer just another principality. It was becoming the true successor to Kiev. The moment of defiance finally came in 1480. By this time, the Golden Horde was weakening, torn apart by internal conflicts. The Prince of Moscow, Ivan III, who would become known as Ivan the Great, felt strong enough to make his move. He refused to pay the annual tribute to the Khan. The Mongol army marched to confront him, and the two forces faced each other across the Ujura River. After a long standoff, with neither side willing to start a major battle, the Mongol army simply turned around and went home. This event, known as the Great Stand on the Ujira River, effectively marked the end of Mongol rule over Russia. Moscow was finally free and sovereign. With independence secured, Moscow's power grew rapidly. Ivan the Great's grandson, Ivan IV, took things a step further. In 1547, he was crowned not as a grand prince, but as the first Tsar of all the Russias. The word Tsar comes from the Roman title Caesar, and it signified that he saw himself as the heir to the Roman and Byzantine emperors. Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, was a complex and brutal ruler. He expanded Russian territory dramatically, conquering the Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan. He also centralized power with an iron fist, crushing the power of the old nobility. The Tsardom of Russia was born, a new, powerful and autocratic state with Moscow at its absolute center. By the late 17th century, Russia was a huge and powerful Tsardom, but it was also, pretty isolated and technologically behind the rest of Europe. This all began to change with the arrival of one of Russia's most dynamic and formidable rulers, Peter the Great. Peter was a giant of a man, full of energy and boundless curiosity. He was determined to modernize his country and turn it into a major European power. As a young man, he traveled to Western Europe in disguise, working in shipyards in Holland and England to learn their secrets of shipbuilding and industry. He came back to Russia with a clear vision. Russia had to change, and it had to change now. Peter's reforms were sweeping and honestly often brutal. He forced the nobility, known as the boyars, to shave their long beards and adopt Western-style clothing. He reformed the army, building a modern, professional force equipped with the latest weapons. He established a powerful navy from scratch. His greatest ambition was to secure a window on the west, a port on the Baltic Sea that would give Russia direct access to European trade and ideas. To achieve this, he fought a long and difficult war with Sweden. After finally winning, he built a magnificent new capital city on the marshy land he had conquered. He called it St. Petersburg, and it was designed to be a grand, European-style city. About a generation after Peter's death, another powerful ruler came to the throne who would continue his work of expanding and modernizing the empire. She was a German princess who came to Russia to marry the heir, but she seized power in a coup and became Empress Catherine the Great. Catherine was highly intelligent and ambitious, and she saw herself as an enlightened monarch. She corresponded with famous philosophers like Voltaire and promoted the arts and sciences. Under her rule, the beautiful Hermitage Museum was founded, and the Russian court in St. Petersburg became one of the most dazzling in all of Europe. Like Peter, Catherine was also a brilliant military strategist and expansionist. Her armies won major victories against the Ottoman Empire, giving Russia control over the entire northern coast of the Black Sea, including the valuable Crimean Peninsula. This finally achieved Russia's age-old dream of securing a warm water port. She also participated in the partitions of Poland, adding huge territories in the west, including much of modern-day Belarus and Ukraine, to her empire. By the end of her reign, the Russian Empire was larger and more powerful than ever before. It was a true global force, stretching from Poland in the west to the Pacific Ocean in the east, a legacy of two of its most remarkable rulers. By the beginning of the 20th century, the mighty Russian Empire was in deep trouble. Despite the modernizations of Peter and Catherine, it was still a land of immense contrasts. A small, wealthy elite lived in luxury in the beautiful cities of St. Petersburg and Moscow, while the vast majority of the population were poor peasants living in difficult conditions with little hope for the future. The political system was an autocracy where the Tsar, Nicholas II, held absolute power. Discontent was growing. Workers in the new factories wanted better rights, intellectuals wanted political freedom, and peasants wanted land. The empire was like a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. That spark came in the form of World War I. In 1914, Russia joined the war against Germany and Austria-Hungary. The war was a disaster for Russia. The army was poorly equipped and badly led, and it suffered millions of casualties. On the home front, the war caused severe food shortages and economic chaos. The people's faith in the Tsar and his government collapsed completely. Nicholas II made a terrible mistake by going to the front lines to command the army himself, leaving his German-born wife, the Tsarina Alexandra, in charge. Her reliance on the strange and mystical advisor, Grigory Rasputin, further damaged the royal family's reputation. In February 1917, the situation exploded. Starving workers and women demanding bread went on strike in the capital, which had been renamed Petrograd. The soldiers, who were supposed to stop the protests, refused to fire on the crowds and instead joined them. Within days, the government lost all control. With no support left, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate the throne, ending 300 years of Romanov dynasty rule. A temporary government, known as the Provisional Government, took over. But this new government was weak. It made the unpopular decision to continue the war and failed to solve the country's deep problems, especially the demand for peace, land and bread. Another more radical group was waiting for its chance. This was the Bolshevik Party, led by a brilliant and ruthless revolutionary named Vladimir Lenin. Lenin had been in exile, but returned to Russia in April 1917 with a clear and simple message that appealed to the masses. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks launched a second revolution. Their armed supporters, the Red Guards, stormed the Winter Palace and arrested the members of the provisional government. They seized power in the name of the workers and peasants. The world's first communist state was born, an event that would dramatically change the course of Russian and world history for the rest of the century. After the Bolsheviks seized power, Russia was plunged into a brutal civil war. The Bolsheviks, known as the Reds, fought against a collection of different groups known as the Whites, who wanted to restore the old order. The war was incredibly destructive, but by 1922, Lenin's Red Army was victorious. Lenin then established a new country, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union. It was a state built on the communist ideas of Karl Marx, where the government controlled all industry, land and property. After Lenin's death in 1924, a power struggle began, which was won by one of the most ruthless dictators in history, Joseph Stalin. Stalin's rule was a time of massive industrialization and immense terror. He launched a series of 5-year plans to rapidly transform the Soviet Union from a peasant society into an industrial superpower. He forced peasants onto huge collective farms, a policy that led to terrible famine and the deaths of millions. At the same time, he began the Great Purge, a campaign of political repression where anyone suspected of being an enemy of the state was arrested. Millions were executed or sent to forced labor camps, known as the Gulag. Despite this incredible human cost, Stalin's policies did succeed in building a powerful industrial and military machine, which would soon be put to the ultimate test. That test was World War II. In 1941, Nazi Germany launched a surprise invasion of the Soviet Union. The war on the Eastern Front was the largest and bloodiest conflict in human history. The Soviet people suffered unimaginable losses, with estimates of over 27 million dead. But they fought back with incredible courage and resilience. The Battle of Stalingrad became a crucial turning point, where the Soviet Red Army stopped the German advance and began the long, hard push towards Berlin. The Soviet Union's victory in 1945 was a moment of immense national pride, but it came at a staggering price. The country was devastated, yet it had emerged from the war as one of the world's 2 superpowers, along with the United States. The decades after the war were defined by the Cold War, a long and tense standoff between the communist Soviet Union and the capitalist West. The world lived in the shadow of nuclear weapons as both sides built up huge arsenals. The USSR achieved some incredible successes during this time, such as launching Sputnik, the first satellite, and sending Yuri Gagarin, the first human, into space. However, the centrally planned economy struggled to provide consumer goods for its people, and there was no political freedom. By the 1980s, the system was creaking under the strain. The leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, tried to reform it with policies of glasnost, meaning openness, and perestroika, or restructuring, but it was too little, too late. In 1991, the Soviet Union peacefully dissolved, ending the great communist experiment after nearly 70 years. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 was a seismic event. Russia re-emerged as an independent nation, but it faced enormous challenges. The country had to build a completely new political and economic system almost overnight. The first president of the new Russian Federation was Boris Yeltsin. His government introduced shock therapy economic reforms, aiming to quickly transition from communism to capitalism. State-owned industries were sold off and markets were opened up. However, this transition was chaotic and painful for many ordinary Russians. It led to hyperinflation, widespread unemployment, and a sharp decline in living standards. A small group of well-connected individuals, known as oligarchs, became fantastically wealthy, while millions struggled to get by. The 1990s were a turbulent decade for Russia, a time of newfound freedom but also of great uncertainty and instability. The country struggled with a weak economy, political infighting, and a war in the region of Chechnya. National pride was low, and many felt that Russia had lost its status as a great power on the world stage. At the very end of 1999, an ailing Boris Yeltsin made a surprise announcement: he was resigning. He handed power to his chosen successor, a former KGB officer who was then the Prime Minister. His name was Vladimir Putin. This moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in Russia's post-Soviet history, one that would be defined by this one man. Under Vladimir Putin's leadership, Russia experienced a dramatic turnaround. Boosted by high prices for oil and gas, Russia's main exports, the economy began to recover and grow. Living standards improved, and a sense of stability and order returned after the chaos of the 1990s. Putin consolidated power, reining in the oligarchs and strengthening the control of the central government. He promised to restore Russia's strength and dignity, a message that was very popular with the Russian people. He became a symbol of a resurgent Russia, determined to reclaim its place as a major player in global affairs. His presidency brought a period of renewed confidence and national pride. In the 21st century, modern Russia continues to be a powerful and complex nation. It faces ongoing challenges, including an economy heavily reliant on natural resources, demographic issues, and a complicated relationship with the West. Under Putin, Russia has pursued a more assertive foreign policy, seen in its actions in places like Georgia, Crimea, and Ukraine, which has led to significant tensions with Europe and the United States. Today, Russia sees itself as a distinct civilization, not quite European and not quite Asian, with its own unique path and interests. Its journey from ancient tribes to a modern nuclear power has been long and often difficult, and its role in the world continues to be a subject of great debate and importance. Looking back across the centuries, Russia's story is one of incredible endurance and dramatic transformation. It is a journey that began in the vast forests and riverlands of Eastern Europe, inhabited by scattered Slavic tribes. From these humble beginnings, the first great state, the Kievan Rus, was forged through a mixture of Viking ambition and Slavic culture. This early state gave Russia its name, its language, and its soul-defining Orthodox Christian faith. This foundational period established a cultural and spiritual identity that has proven remarkably resilient, surviving through centuries of turmoil and change, and continues to be a core part of what it means to be Russian. The nation's spirit was then tested by fire. The devastating Mongol invasion shattered the Kievan Rus, but it did not destroy the Russian people. Instead, this long period of domination forced them to adapt and unite. It was during this shadow that a new center of power, Moscow, began its patient and clever rise. The princes of Moscow gathered the Russian lands, threw off the Mongol yoke, and established a powerful new state. The crowning of Ivan the Terrible as the first Tsar marked the birth of a formidable autocracy, a system of absolute rule that would define Russian politics for the next 400 years and shape its relationship with its own people. The age of the empire saw Russia burst onto the world stage. Visionary and ruthless rulers like Peter the Great and Catherine the Great dragged their nation into the modern era. They expanded its borders to create a vast continent-spanning empire, built a magnificent new capital, and made Russia a force to be reckoned with in European politics. Yet, this mighty empire rested on a foundation of inequality, which eventually crumbled under the immense pressures of war and revolution. The fall of the Tsar in 1917 led to a radical new experiment, the creation of the Communist Soviet Union, a superpower that challenged the world and reached for the stars, but ultimately collapsed under its own internal contradictions. From the ashes of the Soviet Union, a new Russia emerged, navigating the difficult transition to a market economy and a new political reality. Today, Russia stands as a testament to its own epic history. It is a nation shaped by its geography, its faith, its triumphs, and its tragedies. From the early river traders to the Tsars in the Kremlin, from the Red Commissars to the leaders of the modern federation, the journey has been long, complex, and often bloody. It is a story of survival against the odds, of building and rebuilding, and of a constant search for identity and security in a changing world. Russia's epic journey is far from over, and its enduring legacy continues to shape our world.
Ready for a history adventure? Join our community. Subscribe to World History, smash that like, share with friends, and drop your thoughts below. Let's make history together. See you in the comments.